This is Tech Me As I Am, a video series and podcast where self-love is shaking up the status quo of corporate America. We're diving into authentic stories that are creating space for you to feel seen, be vulnerable, and succeed working in the everyday. So let's be real, let's be different, and let's get courageous, y'all.
Hello, I'm Evan Leaphart, founder and CEO of Kredit Academy, and I'm on the Tech Me As I Am podcast, and today I'll be talking about the parallels between financial habits and positive habits in life.
Thanks for tuning in to Tech Me As I Am today. I'm your host, Brittany Mack, and we're really focusing on self-love in a different way with your credit score. Ultimately, we're flipping the script and understanding the radical understanding of self-love and what your credit score and your finances have in terms of being able to be financially free. We have none other than Evan Leaphart here with Kredit Academy to talk to us a little bit more about how to do that and being able to establish this sense of self-love as he's been able to do it for himself. Evan, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
So tell me, let's learn a little bit more about Evan. How did you get started? What did this journey become for you in terms of how you've gotten started?
Yeah, it started from my personal use case. I was that kid, like a lot of people, turned 18, got a credit card right away and spent it on who knows what. Jordans, t-shirts, I don't know. But I know I spent it irresponsibly. And I looked back on that and I realized that 95% of that was definitely my fault. But it was like, I didn't learn anything about this until it was too late. So I've always been an entrepreneur, but this was the business I always wanted to build.
I remember that. I understand that in terms of myself. I was an 18-year-old mom and I got approved for a Wells Fargo credit card and I had a $1,200 credit. And I was like, oh, look at me. I'm about to go out here and spend some money and I'm gonna get a couple of diapers, but you know, mom gotta do her thing. Now 18, I didn't know what I was doing, but to your point, the Jordans, buying all the different things, not having the financial education to really understand that, I ended up putting myself in a lot of debt too. And it can really haunt you when you get older because it's like baggage that's following you everywhere you go.
1,000%.
So you said, you started this journey, and you had this experience from a financial standpoint in terms of credit cards. Was that ultimately always where you wanted to start, or have you always just been an entrepreneur?
I've always been an entrepreneur. I was the lemonade stand kid. Literally had a lemonade stand.
Did you?
Yeah. It was funny. I was a couple years back. I looked at something. And I sent my mom like a proposal for like a loan when I was like 14 years old. I had a whole pro forma and like a 3-year repayment plan with interest. I didn't get the loan, but I've always been that kid.
Oh man, that makes me think about my 12-year-old Mason. He did the same thing. Oh, and with interest, but I'm like, where's the interest coming from? Where's the income? Where's the income?
Yeah.
Okay, so you started a lemonade stand as a kid. You had this like embedded in you since just your upbringing, your early beginning. What do you feel like compelled you to want to see this side of things? Like Kredit Academy, talk to us a little bit more about what that is, why you created it, what the importance of it is.
Yeah. So when we started this, we said we wanted to be the vitamin, not the pain pill. Where we are now is we're kind of a little bit of both. I realized that I wanted to give everybody a fighting shot when it came to finances. So we talk about all things financial education, but credit is kind of that in-boss when it comes to what you need to learn, because what good's an 800 credit score if you don't know the basics of money? So I said for us to effectively do this, we can't teach credit in a vacuum, and we also shouldn't just segment education by age, right? You have 16-year-olds that may know money like they're 35 and 35-year-olds that may know money like they're 11, right? So we said we need to find something that encompasses all different walks of life and where they may be at in their learning journey. And that's really what Kredit Academy is about, right? So we're one part education and then one part actual credit access, right?
Okay, that's beautiful. I think, like I said before, there's beauty, and there's something in being able to financially be able to take yourself out of one position and put yourself into another position. Also being a founder, and in your own journey of starting something, I think there's a level of resilience that founders have that, you need to be able to have consistency, right? And that's something that's also very translated over to credit, Talk to me a little bit about consistency for you. What does that mean? And how do you implement some of those things in your life? Or maybe let's start where you didn't have it and then how you got it.
It's a good point because there's a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
So you think about, to bring it to credit, right? Like the biggest factor of your credit score is your payment history, right? Like, do you do things on time? And that's simply just showing up, bills due, pay it, right? Things like that. And sometimes we have these tasks to do in life that we just don't show up for. I didn't show up for a lot of my tasks in my 20s or my late teens, right? And I think as time goes on, you realize that they say showing up is half the battle, but it's probably 75%, right? Like, once you're there and you're continuously doing these things, you'll see these incremental changes and this incremental progress, and you look back like, wow, I can't believe I did all that, right? Like, and that's on the personal journey, and then just even on the credit side, you spend responsibly, you pay every month, and 2 years from now, you look back and you're like, man, my score is completely skyrocketed, right? So it's really underrated, just the value of just showing up.
Yeah, I think to your point, showing up is something that we need to be able to do for ourselves first and foremost, because if we don't show up for ourselves, we can't show up for other people. And, like you said, there's these parallels. I think, if you really want to peel the layers back when it comes to a credit score, those are soft skills that are embedded in these things and in these mechanisms. And then we then get evaluated based off of those things. And, just to be personal with it, I've had a credit score where it was not a very pleasant one. And I felt like it was haunting me everywhere I went. And even when I figured out how to be more consistent in my life, the thing was following me for so long, it could be really demotivating. And, you're just like, how do I continuously keep showing up? And I think that's a lot really translated into being a founder. When you have a lot of things that follow you, or things that challenges that you constantly will run into, or you feel like you can't get away from, or, you have to think outside of the box. Can you talk to us a little bit more about maybe some of those things that maybe you have faced as being a founder, and how those behaviors have translated into how you've been able to show up for Kredit Academy?
Good question. So I think for me, it's always, you can have different pathways, but at the end, it should be around the same mission, right? So what we do today with Kredit Academy is not what I envisioned when I started this. Like, my customer's different, the audience is a little different, like the way the product even looks is different. But at the end of the day, it's still the same mission. It's saying like, hey, how do we give folks a fighting chance with financial education, so we put them in better circumstances to be able to make smarter decisions with their money in the future. So that's really what it's been for us, is saying like, hey, there might be a different way to sell this, make money, be able to have that growth, right? Like, this is it's a for-profit business, right? So while I want to do good, I also want to be able to retire and travel the world. So in doing that, I had to say, okay, who would benefit most from what we're building? And speaking through the lens, not about selling our product and being so product proud, I like to say, where you spend less time like selling to the things that actually matter to your customer, and you're more so just kind of talking about all the features that you have. And that's been an exercise, because it's tough for us as founders. We just are so proud of what we do. We want to show off everything, and it's like, I wasn't buying it for that, but if you actually do that,
right,
I'd happily pay for that. So just learning that stuff along the way. I don't think we asked enough questions in the beginning, right? Like, it was very naive. It's like, okay, you build an app to help parents teach kids about credit. Who's going to use it? Everybody. Wildly naive to think, right? And then you're like, okay, just build it and get a bunch of users, and then you'll get a bunch of money. And it's like, doesn't work like that either, right? So I think we were building the plane while flying it, like a lot of founders will say, but you're still flying it, right? So I think that's the name of the game, is really to just stay in it.
Yeah, I would agree. I would definitely agree. And I think to your point, building the plane while flying it, we constantly do that as founders. And when you're building a plane and then you're flying it, that analogy, I hear it all the time in corporate America, all the time, in any type of anything you're building. We're building the plane and flying it. I'm like, well, how are you flying it if it's being built? That means you're falling off all of the seams and everything's falling apart, but you're still figuring out a way to still fly, right? I think that there's a level of resilience that comes in being a founder to be able to push through those things when you're building something. And there's a key thing that I think you said here, whereas, you have to pivot. You have to understand your customer. And I think that's a skill set in active listening, right? Again, I always try to translate everything going back to that sense of self, listening to understand rather than listening to reply. And so if you're building a product and you're saying, hey, I think this is what's going to be good for you, that's not listening to anyone, right? That's not actively. You're like, hey, you said you want something for credit. Okay, great. But are you actually listening? Are you actually hearing them? And so I think that's a key skill set in order to be a good founder. You have to understand how to do that for yourself first, right? And I think that's something that you do really, really well. Do you feel like there are other soft skills or things that you personally have internalized to help make you be able to build Kredit Academy?
I think before I say what I do right, I do many things wrong.
Okay.
So I probably do 99 things wrong. But the one thing I think I do well is people management. I try to empower versus dictate what are next steps. And just being human with everybody in this process, right? Like it's at the end of the day, like it's serious, but it's not that serious, right? Like, like there's still a lever that like something would prioritize and take precedent over everything we're doing if something were to happen, right? So like knowing that, it allows me to have more grace when like working with folks and just making a more fun environment. And I think when you do that and you're fair with people, you can get people to maybe go beyond what is normal, which is super important for in the case of a founder, right? Like you might be able to ask an advisor for 3 hours of their time, where if you were kind of a mean person, they'd say, I got 30 minutes, right? Or, you're just saying like, we're almost there. Can you give me net 60 instead of net 30 on this invoice, right? Like when people believe in your journey, but also believe in you and they appreciate the way that you treat them, it goes a long way. I think they say the golden rule is to treat people the way you want to be treated, but the platinum rule is to treat people the way they want to be treated. So you have to have the active listening skill that you talked about so you can, work well with people.
Absolutely. I think that is a key defining point in leadership, because nobody wants to follow a dictator. Toxic people attract toxic people. Been there, done that. And I don't want that no more. So I want to learn a little bit more about what we would think about defining financial self-love. So something that I think about when we are financially trying to love ourselves means that you're treating your future sense of self with a level of kindness and awareness. And when it comes to credit, that is something that in your future you're going to need. You're going to need it for a house, a car, a job potentially. So when you think about loving yourself and your future self, what are certain things that you think that you are doing as a founder to love yourself better so that you can take care of your future self? I'll start with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you think of deeper love, right? Like you sacrifice things that may cause instant gratification, right? And that's the same concept for credit. So you think about, okay, I could get 2 credit cards right now with $5,000 credit limits, and now I got $10,000 to spend, right? Like one, now I've just decreased the average age of my accounts, and 2, if I'm doing what I just said I'll probably max all these out, and now I have high utilization, which is going to affect my score as well. So I think there's a lot of parallels in it, right? Like even you think of the average age of accounts, inquiries, all of these things, right? Like these are things that might cause some immediate term like relief, but long-term pain, right? So I think it's important to say these decisions that I make with my money, I know this might be good for now, but how will I feel about this in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And I mean, if you think that way and then the answer still comes that the immediate benefit is what's best for you, I still think that's okay, right? Like, but you've at least done the checks and balances to make sure that you're making the best decision.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And as you were saying these things, I'm thinking like, you know what? This is like, there's a credit score, but there's a life score too. And I think the parallel, like as you're talking more and more like instant gratification, right? What are you doing right now for instant gratification that doesn't serve you later on down the line, right? These mechanisms that we have to, consistency, being able to pay something on time. If you're consistent in anything, you'll be consistent in your credit, you'll be consistent in everything you touch because it's intrinsically inside of you and who you are. So those same things, like I'm just starting to think like there is a life credit score, if you will. Do you think that there are other things that people should be thinking about that pertain to a credit score that maybe they can apply to their personal lives as well?
I think it's interesting when you think about credit scores that there's a certain level of like shame that's associated with it, or pride, right?
Mm.
Like you get into the 800s, people will just say, hey, my name's Evan and my score is 8, whatever. Mine's not, by the way, but I'm just saying, there's a
Right.
lot of pride with it, but you get below a certain threshold, nobody wants to talk about it.
Right. Right.
I think, but to break through on that from the credit side, and personally, like, you can really help people out if you're just transparent, right? So even in our journey, I tell people all the time, like, I had a great credit score, then we bought a house and I built a business, and there's these peaks and valleys that come with that, right? Like, I do that timeline and I say, okay, look, I truly believe in this business and I have some credit, and I believe that I'll be able to eventually pay this back. So for now, I'm going to go high on utilization to make this investment in my business, right? Like, that's a calculated decision that I know that allows me to do something immediate, but may cause some like long-term stress, right? So, yeah, but I think, but if you can just candidly assess where you're at in the journey and then like share that with people resonate with people, right? Like when you're kind of shielding the mask a bit.
Oh, absolutely. People 100% resonate with more people just being themselves. And the transparency, I tell people all the time, it's like we suffer so much alone in our thoughts because we feel like we're not good enough. And to your point, the shame or the pride that comes with it. Well, so I'm going to pull out that Amex right quick. Oh, here we go. I got the platinum card right here. Like, the little 800 score, in dating even. Like, I'm, in the dating streets these days. And, at this age, you're like, okay, what's the credit score looking like? Like, well, what are we doing over there? So, but to your point, though, I think there's a lot of emotional factors that come with that. And I think by you creating a organization that is allowing us to have different touch points and levers to pull on with people regardless of their age, can help with instilling certain values and belief systems in oneself to be able to do that. Because I think your credit is a reflection of who you are. It is a reflection of the things that you pour into yourself. And to your point, if you want to get out of feeling shame, what are the mechanisms that you could do to help get yourself out of those things that create instant gratification and falling in those traps? So we're coming up on towards the end of the episode, but I do want to ask you a couple of real quick questions. If you could tell our audience something in terms of the things that they need to be thinking about when it comes to their credit, because to your point, I think there's a lot of shame, especially in the Black community, when it comes to credit and being denied access to things. And when you finally get it, you're like, oh, okay, it's time to go run this up. I finally got that thing I've been wanting for so long.
Yep.
What would you say would be a great mindset to have to conquer that from your own perspective?
I think this one's more just informational, and it's know the difference between like Vantage and FICO score, right? So like what you see on like a Credit Karma is your Vantage score, but that's actually not what lenders are going to check. They're going to check your FICO score. So like understanding that, right? So you have an idea of what things are, so you're not blindsided. But I think the biggest thing that you could do to like proactively take control is just map out all of your expenses, right? And even if you don't master the formula of credit per se, just keep it simple. Understand that I will make sure that I pay this bill when it's due, and I will make sure that I use less than 30%, or even if I can, 10% of all of these cards. And if I can, I'll try to condense that to using one card. Very basic principles, and I don't close my oldest cards, and I don't apply for a bunch of stuff. You just stick to those basics, and literally you will be fine.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm hearing is education, educate ourselves, and be consistent and disciplined. I'm hearing discipline in what you're saying. And then making sure that you're taking your time and going for the long haul versus just the instant quick fixes. That's what I'm hearing in a short, like, okay.
Active listening.
Active listening, right? Active listening. All of these things, again, intrinsically can create a better circle of people around you and better ways to love yourself ultimately. Okay, rapid fire questions. I got a couple for you here real quick.
Okay.
I always ask these same ones because I always want to know what my guests are listening to, and then also what books they're reading. So First one is, when you are getting ready to go on stage or go on a podcast or whatever it is, where you got to hype yourself up to get ready, go in the room with the investors, what is your go-to song that you're going to play for yourself to get yourself in the headspace, if you have one?
Jay-Z, You Don't Know. Probably go with the third verse.
Okay. Oh, the third verse. Why the third verse, though?
That's where he just starts talking that talk.
Oh, okay. When he goes in, he's like flow, and then he just goes in. Okay.
Came into 100 grand strong, and then he, he starts telling you.
Okay. I'll rock with that. That's a real answer.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the second question I have for you is a book that has changed your life, or a podcast, something that you listened to or taken in that's been a pivotal key in changing the way that you view things.
There's many books, but I think the book I always go back to in reference the most is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, for sure.
I've
I've read that the most.
Okay. Which makes sense too now, the credit and the habits that you got to have to be able to, okay. That makes sense. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Evan, for being here, for being a founder, for doing what you do, creating the spaces, helping us financially love ourselves better, and showing us the parallels of how to do that internally as well. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. And you've put together a wonderful podcast. And I want to make sure I give you your flowers on camera as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.